there's supposed to be someone else sitting with me today. Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you all out to heDONizm. No, it's not what you thought it was. For those who may have thought that the basis of this is to be like hedonism, right? So mine was a play on words, more so taken from the pronoun he, Don, coming from the root of my name, and isms, something that we do in knowledge transfer, something we do in ciphers, something we do when we want to spark up something. For those that know, you do know. But I would like to welcome you to this, my place, which is a safe space. And the only thing I require is for you to bring your best attire. And no, it's not materialistic. Your best attire is that you wear every day, or at least that you should wear every day, and that's your truth. Wear your truth every day, because why? It looks good on you. And ultimately, this is a base place for us to identify our pleasures, right? That meaning of the hedonism is to pleasure oneself. And no, we're not talking about that. Let's come back to what this platform is about, and it's talking about the pleasures of most things. As you can see over my right, your left, you can see somewhat of an homage to hip-hop. Birth back in 1972. This marks the 50th year anniversary of that which most of us, or at least myself, I should say, derive from. Remember Rappin' Duke? Daha, daha, never thought that hip-hop would take it this far. Well, here we are. Here we are, 50 years later, a derivative of hip-hop. There's so many different channels. Where would we be without hip-hop? Or at least that's my story. Why? I was a Bravo, Oscar Yellow, that being a B-boy. I was a Delta Juliet, which is a DJ. If I were to turn the cameras around, you would see digital turntables. You would see analog turntables. And these are some of the elements or artifacts of hip-hop. And we'll get into that another day. But basically, out of all of that, of what I said, this platform is simply put a place to pod. Today is my 0 episode. And it's tough. Why is it tough? Because today gives me an ability to wrestle and tussle with the ability to finish and follow through an assignment. For those of you that know me personally, first of all, welcome. Thank you for joining. You guys know this means the world to me. For those that I have blown your ear off the cuff, and for those who said, hey, man, I knew you had something in the tuck. Well, ta-da! Here it is. So again, welcome. I can't welcome you enough. And I encourage you to stay tuned. What you see today may not be what's tomorrow. What you hear today will change. My pivot and my escalation is to only cause friction, which causes elevation. So I do plan on going this way. So now boarding heDONizm, we'll be cruising at approximately, I don't know how many feet, but stay tuned and enjoy the ride. Hey, listen, there is supposed to be someone else sitting by my side today. And that is what's tough for me. And if I didn't introduce myself, I'm Dante, also known as Mechadon. Some call me Don. Some call me Tay. Just don't call me with drama. That's all I ask, okay? My jokes are so flatline, so please pardon the dry humor. But I'm trying to laugh today to actually keep from crying. Have you ever had visions and actual scope laid out, and then all of a sudden, here's a knock at the door, and you answer the door, and they say, hi, my name is Life. I would like to come in. And you're like, but I didn't invite you. But they say, but I need to come in. And you say, but who invited you? How did you get my address? Well, that's how life shows up sometimes. Right as you have a vision, right as you have things in scope, in your crosshairs, and then all of a sudden, there's that knock at the door. So you let life out and you go, hey, I'm going to continue on with my life. I'm just not going to handle this. That form of life can stay out there. This form of life will exist without you. Boom. So you shut the door And you get things back in scope and you get on your happy path, and the next thing you know, buzz, 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 buzz. And you pick up your phone and there's that text. And you know in some smartphones how you can see an abbreviated version of the text without even diving into the smartphone. And it says, hey, this is life. Do you have a minute? No, I don't. Buzz, buzz, and it continues. And that's how life comes at you. And again, for those that know me personally, you know some of the things that I've been through. And out of all confidentiality and respect, I'm not going to address that here on this platform. But I do want to talk about an element that should be here with me today that is not. So I wrote down some notes because I knew if I went off the cuff and I just started talking about it, I would be emotionally charged and I would probably get off the tracks with an emotional tear. So I'm doing this to help me. I'm not a big fan of reading notes. I like coming off the top of the dome. You guys know me. For those hip hop heads, if you know, freestyling is sometimes the best artist or gives the best delivery of an MC. So I had to write this down to keep myself on track because this has been an emotional roller coaster for me, because I'll say it again for the cheap seats. There is supposed to be someone sitting at my side today. Let's get into it. So in or around 2018, I'm working at one of these dope fintech companies, and you know how it is when you start a new gig, you put on your corporate hat, but yet you don't want to contact or code switch so much to where you're not being your authentic self. So once I got in the gig, I'm looking around and I'm seeing, imagine an environment of a Google or a Facebook or your modern day tech company where they have poofs and there's not really office spaces. You actually have work spaces and open spaces. And the only thing that separates you from having a private moment is maybe a fish tank. And for those of you that know, you know, imagine a fish in a tank. Yes, that's your privacy. You can be seen but not heard. So it's one of those type of environments where, again, you're wearing these corporate hats, trying not to code switch too much. So I bring my authentic self to work. And with true Dante swag, I had it in full effect. And you know how sometimes you can get your bop on in the office environment. You may start off the day with a polo and khakis, and the next thing you know, the Dante swag is just in full effect, and you start to feel comfortable, and that's what it was. So imagine the open space that I gave you before. So me and this brother, sharp, smooth brother. Matter of fact, I kept looking at him because I'm like, man, we have some similarities. What's going on here? Are you copping my style, or I'm cop? You know, I don't cop styles, but what's going on, my guy? So I say that in a jovial manner because those that know we had a lot in common when it comes to physical appearance. And while doing so, in the modern day tech spaces, we would often give each other the head bob, the fist in the air, or oftentimes we would come by and say real silly things to each other just to break up the monotony of what we have in modern day tech companies. So it was fun. But nonetheless, God was working and we didn't even see it. So Nas and I would sometimes have lunch, and imagine a fish tank. Rather than it being a compartmentalized lunchroom, it was very organic, very vegan-esque, where you go into a lunchroom and there's no, unhealthy food or unhealthy drinks or unhealthy snacks. So Nas and I would bring in the banging soul food sometime and just disrupt the whole atmosphere. But not only that, we gave it an environment where we were sometimes exchanging colloquialisms, and others would come in the room, and you know how folks do when they want to be nosy. What are y'all up to? Man, just say you want to sit down and listen without going into all that. But Nas and I, we had our hidden jokes, so we knew how to combat sometimes corniness when it came to people wanting to get all up in our business. So with that being said, we wouldn't always eat in the lunchroom. Sometimes Nas and I would just bring our laptops and just kind of co-work in the space. But yet when we had a break in the day, we would just jump into some conversations. And quite often, people would walk by and see Nas and I kind of giving body language towards each other. Sometimes we would grab the stomach because we was in full laughter, or we would grab the head, or we would grab tissue and wipe the eyes because we were just dying laughing, or we probably were just sharing something that constituted tears at that particular time. But nonetheless, can you imagine the atmosphere of two brothers just in harmony in some form, some facet? Either they were crying, they were laughing, or they were actually in deep thought, deep concentration, or they were pretty much sparking isms towards each other, just bouncing ideologies off of each other. So I'll say it again, God was working and we didn't even see it. So people would come through and we would invoke taking it there, right? So we would talk about, and when I say tightrope, we would tightrope some conversations to the point where people were like, wow, I didn't think we could talk about this in the atmosphere. There's a right, let me just say this for the cheap seats. There's a right and a wrong way to have conversations in the workplace, and Nas and I knew how to walk that tightrope. So with that being said, we would often take it there and handle the heat, and we both could handle the heat as well as receive and yet take it for those that were welcoming that. We were the Stephen A. and the Max Kellerman of that time in debate, or the Skip Bayless and the Shannon Sharp, if you will, of controversy. We knew how to go back and forth without crossing the line. I mean, there was no habitual line stepping in Nas and I co-creation of what we did. So Nas, a little bit about Nas. He was a devoted husband, a devoted father, a man of God, but he was well balanced. And I can say Nas was a guy in modern day form and fashion of creating his way and path in hip hop. The man was a dope MC. And I'm not just saying that to say it. I can actually put proof to the pen and let you see some of Nas's work. He's bona fide in that area where he really put out some dope stuff. But nonetheless, he had MC skills for days that could pay the bills. And he was also a graphic artist, a UX engineer. He actually had skills to pay the bills. If that's a jargon or a phrase, I saw this man walk the walk and talk the talk. But he was not good at it. Let me just say that. No, he wasn't good at it. He was great at it. Nas was great at it. And again, balance is something that he put into play when he actually did all of those things. So in our phase of exchanging colloquialisms and having mad partner conversations, I would have this thing where I would get overly excited, but yet knew my volume control. And yet I was a great debater with it. But I had a phrase called get in my Kanye. So I used to say, Nas, let me just have a second to get in my Kanye. So I would just spaz out, throw things up against the wall. I would actually spark some visions and some actually road mapping that I had in my head for things that I wanted to see in the future and how I can contribute to my community and things of that nature. And Nas would just walk away, come back fast, hit me in the arm and be like, Tay, get out of my head. I was thinking somewhat of the same thing. However, I was wanting to know if we could take this approach. Now, imagine a visionary and someone who could actually put pen to paper from a UX design perspective, and two people who actually had cross paths that actually met at the middle of the road that could actually put the rubber to the road and actually go. That's a bunch of charge. That's a bunch of electricity. And Nas and I, we actually had that. And when I said, you know what? There's a lot that we can do. There's a lot that he said, Tay, let's get it. And I thought that it's very rare that you can find somebody that can follow you and come in with ad libs and not interrupt or disrupt the flow, but say, go ahead, finish, because I want to jump in after you say that. And it doesn't just be some dodo thought. It's actually a thought that aligns with what you were thinking. So it was just yin and yang when it came to creativity, co-creating, and ideating. Nas and I were actually on that path to do something special. So we started to link after hours and far away from home and work, which is we knew that's where we could actually cook. And when ideation met extreme dopeness, that was Nas and I. It was the middle of the road for all of that. All of that had being said. So I had enough. So I said, hey, listen, man. And he cut me off immediately and said, Tay, enough. He said, let's go, let's go. And I remember Nas literally pounding his hand saying, let's go. And without details, he said, Tay, you ain't got to do no convincing to me. I'm ahead of you. And I was like, wow. And Nas was younger than me, so it came with a responsibility of, hey, I cannot drop the ball when it comes to at least being demonstrative, when it comes to showing a younger brother a avenue and not just being a burden of thought. Have you ever had someone that wanted to coexist thoughts with you, however, they had nothing to contribute? Nas came with a bag of tricks. Nas came with a bag of ideas. He was like Felix the Cat, and I was like Inspector Gadget, and we were ready to go, pull out of a bag of tricks. And imagine that, those two coming together. I mean, it was dangerously electrifying to know some of the things we actually had. And please believe we had a backlog. And for those of you that know, Nas and I invested in tools to help us get to a place where we can put these ideas to an actual mapping format. So in this space, I was leading and co-leading Modern Days of Understanding and leading corporate town halls. This is pre-George Floyd, pre-COVID, during COVID, and somewhat afterwards. A lot of action that we put in. There's a lot that I would like to get into, but because of copyright and trademarks of some of the things we had to deal with, I'm going to leave it at that. But I will say, for those that are listening that know what I'm talking about, you guys are so special to me. You guys hit it out the park when it came to community activism, and I'm just going to leave it right there. Shout out to St. Paul, Minneapolis. So much that people were hiring me outside of the walls of work, and as a special guest and a special speaker for all types of events. One that I brought Nas on with was called No Ceilings. And I shared with Nas the momentum, and he said, Tay, you out of here. I didn't know. I said, no, what do you mean I'm out of here? He said, man, did you just see what you did? I said, no, not I. We out of here. And again, the colloquialisms was just going back and forth, but I don't think he understood that this was something that I was pulling with him. If you can see Batman on a motorcycle with a sidecar, I definitely had Nas in a sidecar, or he was the driver of the motorcycle and I was in the sidecar. Nonetheless, we were rolling together. I was not going down this path of electricity without bringing my Ben Franklin on the path with me. So anyway, I laid the blueprint, and we were in full swing to put our dialogues and public display so much that we had a launch date. We were doing pre-production. We were doing pre-gaming. We were doing warm-ups. We actually went to a dope, and I mean dope studio in Atlanta. You know who you are. Shout out, salute to you. But we were actually doing some pre-runs out in Atlanta for some of our go-lives for our actual podcast. Some of the phrasing of that would be multicast spelled with a K, because I thought that the rate of podcasts were going so high that it would be oversaturated and we wouldn't have a shot in hell in trying to compete in this market. Side note, there are hundreds and thousands of podcasts that are created daily. So what makes me think I'll be able to compete in this space? I'll tell you what, I got faith. And not that you have to go and sell the golden calf or fill people with blasphemy to get them to follow, but this has been a vision of mine for the longest. And what's odd today is there's supposed to be someone sitting here with me right now. But I'm sure this is the part that I'm sure most of you, some of you, or maybe all of you can relate to. Just when you have your happy path in place, just when you've spoke those manifestations out, just when you've given those proclamations, just when you've looked in that mirror and say, I can, I will, I must, I desire, you know where I'm going. And then all of a sudden, I was hit with paralysis by analysis. And that's the best way I can put it. Simply put, I was overthinking it all. And let me just stop right here. Side note, let me just derail for 1 second. If you are contemplating doing something, there was a phrase that I was raised and I consistently heard this phrase, and it was actually a commercial. And I want to say it was for HVAC or electricians or construction or something like that. But they said, don't put it off, put it on. So me being in paralysis by analysis and truly overthinking everything, I just decided, hey, let me continue the business aspect of this. So I launched a group text and I wanted to discuss content, and I was also trying to keep the team engaged the best way possible. Nas, I remember Nas one time. Nas was at his, well, let me get back, right, to when you have that happy path and you have everything set up, right? I had family emergencies to come into place. And again, all of these affirmations and all of these proclamations and manifestations that I was putting out in the atmosphere, that happy path got interrupted with that thing that came in the door earlier, and it's called life. Basically, what I'm saying without saying it is, it's not like we can defend or prevent life from happening. You have to take life head on. Don't run away from it. Okay? Don't hide from it. Do your very best. Mediocre probably will handle you in some manipulative ways that could probably toss and turn and have you on sleepless night. Get through it the best way you can, because life is going to keep knocking. It's going to keep calling. It's going to keep asking for you. And the best way is to handle it is head on and do it. Not in my way. You may read 1,000 books or you may have every degree in the world possible, but do it to the best way that you can possibly. Shout out to Michelle Obama. I'm having a brain fart right now, but in her latest book, she talked about suffering or having a minor or mild level of depression. But she said she was able to get over because she was able to accept what it was. So often life will come at you and there's no need to break down, shout about it, cry about it. Quit everything that you possibly have going for yourself. And if you're hearing me right now, you do have the ability to go forward in what you're doing. Trust me, just continue and do the very best you possibly can. Your very best may not be my very best, their very best, or they. You know, we always reference they. And well, you know, they said, well, that may not be your very best. Do your very best that you can and get through it the best way. So life happened and I had some family emergencies, and I would like to get into details, but out of respect, love and adoration for my father, I won't get into true details just because of his confidential nature. But my father is no longer here, and that's as of recently. But leading all the way up through this, it swayed my timeline for my ability to have our go live. So, you know, when you're progressing towards a goal, one of the most common things that can be disruptive is distracting momentum. Momentum can sometimes shut down an idea. It can sometimes shut down progress. It's just because momentum has its way of falling flat, and then you have to actually invoke more air, more oxygen into the situation to have it lift off and go again. Now, keep in mind, the only way through elevation is through friction. So friction causes elevation. I use the term friction causes elevation. Think of an aircraft. That aircraft just can't hover up and go. Some do, but it's going to come at the expense of fuel, jet, all of the aerodynamics that causes it to get off the ground. I don't want to get into geek mode right now, but think about the motions of an aircraft, the rolling, the friction of the wheels towards the machinery and the hydraulics and all of the things that it takes to elevate that aircraft. It's friction, but it will give you momentum to elevate. So I say all of that to say, take life head on as you possibly can, and life will happen even when you have your goals and your aspirations set out for you. Yes, it's true. It can happen to me. It can happen to you. It can happen to anyone. Just do your very best to get through. And when I say family emergencies, I'm not just making that up or giving you terminology. No, there were true to life family emergencies that I was hit with during this time of me trying to launch our multicast, also known as podcast. So I thought the best way for me to keep momentum going was to use technology. So I set up calls, group chats, etc., just to keep the momentum going. And with me being out of state, I just thought that this would be something for us to interact, ping pong each other with ideas, throw thoughts across the board. And let me just be honest with you. There were some thoughts thrown over the wall where they were like, hell no, hell no, we're not doing that. It's out of here. You're far-fetched. But guess what? Later on, thoughts were given of it, and they came back and said, well, you know what? Let's talk about it. It's provocative. Let's get into it. So anyway, trying to keep the momentum going and keep the team engaged the best way possible. But here's one vivid memory that I have just to talk about momentum. But I want to speak to Nas as a human character, as a man. So although we were doing all of these things, rather than Nas telling us he was not available, we get on a Zoom call and you can see the quads and you can see the blocks of the, not profile pictures, but the actual human interaction. So Nas's profile came up, the little silhouette came up of a person, right? And his camera came in and it was it was actually a high gloss and dense, but you can tell after the light started to subside a little bit and he came into focus, Nas was outside, right? And we were talking and I was pointing at my ear because I couldn't hear Nas. And you could tell he was standing up looking. He was standing up looking. So I said, okay, he's preoccupied. This ain't going to go so well. He's the co-seat in this, right? We had production team there, but I needed the co to be engaged. So with that being said, I knew that this Zoom call wasn't going to go too well. But again, I'm speaking of the amazing Nas. So he goes in his crossbody, he goes in his bag, and he pops out this little thing, and he pulls out his ear pods and he put them in. He said, can y'all hear me now? And I just hear these whistles going and people cheering and people yelling and being engaged from an audience or crowd participation perspective. So I go, Nas, what's going on? He said, I'm at my son's track meet. And I said, man, we'll reschedule. You want to do a late night? You know, that's for us to get online after hours, after the family and children is going to bed, and we can actually talk all things pod. And he was like, nah, I can hear, you know, I can walk and chew gum, Tay. And I said, all right, cool. Nas was just that dedicated of an individual where he didn't want to break the path any longer. When I tell you the man was hashtag all in, he was all in to the cause. So he's got his earbuds on, and I could tell when we was talking, he was just looking, and he panned the camera around, and there it was, his son, out there killing it on the track, out there killing it. So it spoke to a little bit about it, his character, and not just the name of dad or father. He was an active name dad and father to his boys. And I looked over to the left as he panned the camera, and I just waved, and there his beautiful wife was there as well. So not only putting time in with the boys, putting time in with the wife, yet trying to have a Zoom call about what's next for us. So just speaking a little bit about the character. Let me just say as a side note, no, I was not pushing for us to have this meeting. It was really the point and objective here was for me to reclaim momentum, reclaim our time on the momentum that we had lost. And I wanted to get the energy back from what we once had. And I'm kind of getting choked up talking about this because, you know, it's one thing to say me, my, but it's another thing to say we as a partner, you know, as partners, how we can get things done. And I just felt incomplete, you know, without Nas, just because we've built so much and I trust it. And oh boy, those that know me, and let me just let you know a little bit about myself, it's very hard for me to put my trust into, I don't want to get into that right now, but it's very hard for me to put my trust into people who has shown you themselves on several different occasions. So it's very rare that Dante, let me just state the fact, my name is Dante, and I very rarely trust unless you show me that trust can be warranted. So Nas gave me all of that. And there's very few people that I know, right, that I put in that deck of cards, if you will. But Nas is one I'll throw down like an ace of spades. Nas is one I'll throw down like that wild card or that draw four. He was just that dude to me, and I'm not blowing him up. The man walked the walk and he talked the talk. He was about it in his delivery, his ability to follow through with things, and I love him to pieces. But where am I going with this? He was multitasking as he was at his son's track meet, but yet was fully engaged and down for the cause. Now, leaving that call, I wondered if our next move were not priority anymore. And when I say priority, we have our business priorities and our family priorities, but I mean momentum towards our goal set. Was this priority anymore? Was this back burner afterthought? So I'm struggling, right? I'm trying to do the very best. Remember I said that earlier? I'm trying to do the very best I can to build momentum. And then all of a sudden I had buy-in. Nas started to create the artwork. Nas started to talk other things, merch, delivery, when we were on the road doing our thing. I'm letting too much out the bag. But he was starting to talk how we could move into things that I had mentioned business-wise for those things to align. So we were starting to move and groove, right? We were starting to, as Stella, the title of the movie, we were starting to get our groove back for that thing that excited us about the pod. So we got back into ideate mode. Nas and I went to go have a couple of cigars, and we actually went to go, a couple of Starbucks, and we got our big iPads, as we call them, the big iPads, and we're sitting down and making everybody wonder what we're talking about, pulling people in, but as well we were street teaming our own marketing. So we were being walking brands to what we were about to deliver. Right. So the momentum picked back up and I was happy. So it's something about it's something about having a happy path towards a goal set, but that comes with a lot of headache, right? That comes with a lot of back pain. That comes with a lot of heavy lifting, right? But I tell you what, if you see the end goal, or if you play the long game, right, and not take shortcuts and try to navigate your quickest way to your goal set, right, you'll fall in love with the process. And that's where I was, as tough and rugged and terrain as the process was. I was deeply and madly in love with the process. Strenuous, right? Late nights, early mornings, right? The ability to context switch between work, family, life, and what you're trying to goal set. True battle. If you know, you know. We'll talk more about this on another day, and we'll get into that. And again, the purpose is not to be so off the rim and whim of what heDONizm will be bringing to you, but I thought it was only proper for me to do the 0 episode in this fashion. Let me continue. So Nas and I, we continue to ideate and go over notes. We continued to go over pros and cons from some of our pre-productions. We did a couple of dry takes. We did a couple of audio tests. We did a couple of video tests. And again, we wasn't striving for perfection. We was just in the ring sparring so we can actually get out there and compete as a heavyweight contender in the world of pod. So we knew we would have to get in a gym, and this is what we call the AV gym that we were actually getting our workout on knocking the kinks out. You may even see or hear kinks in this episode, and that's intentional, right? Friction, elevation. As episodes go, you will see some of that friction and elevation. I don't think you should start off at 10. I'm not saying you should start off at 5 either, but I am saying you should start. I am saying do your very best. So any judgment comes my way, I welcome it, but I will not ingest or digest all, but I will receive and actually take action items as needed. So we had momentum going, and we were actually going over notes from our go live and our pre-records, and we actually had things mapped out, and we were sailing pretty good. And I would love to tell you some of the topics, but some of those topics, because of the day and time, have aged. But one of them was, I won't get into that, but later on, as I was setting up more of our backlog for us to get ready for our go live, our actual production date to actually meet some of the things that we had cooking, to meet those dates, and to, it's one thing to just say, hey, we're going to do something. And I'm not a half donkey guy. I kind of like things baked and ready to serve, rather than, hey, invite people to the barbecue and you just now putting the charcoal in the grill. I'm one of those guys that kind of like to have everything laid out and we just kick back and we lay out. That's just the Don. That's just my style. And I'm not, what works for you, but I'm just a little different when it comes to functional and operational. Y'all know I can be very anal sometimes, but it's with good intent, trust me, and it's to produce good results. I'll say that much. But nonetheless, guys, I'm going through the week and I'm mapping things out. And last time Nas and I talked, we said we will work parallel in 2 different forms because we had things going on, emergencies, life, distractions, you name it. We had it going on, but we refused to lose, and we continued to work towards that goal set. Remember we talked about that, or remember I talked about that? We continued to head down that path. All right, so I remember one morning I get a call out of nowhere, and it was very rare. It was weird. And it was a good friend of mine, and it was a friend of mine that worked at the same job where Nas and I met. So he called, and this brother is an ace of spade. I mean, he's a solid cat. Like, he called me, and I noticed he had that business tone on. So I'm thinking, hey, maybe there is a issue he maybe want to partner or pair on, and maybe identify or rectify the issue. But he had that business tone on, and I knew it was something, and it wasn't a coke and joke conversation. This was more so business. So I thought. But the tone of his voice is as if he was trying to get himself together to share something with me. So he's got my attention, and I'm like, yo, fam, what's up? Fam, talk to me. And I noticed that he was not stuttering, but he kept starting over. Hey, fam, what's fam, what's going on? Everything good? Talk to me. I mean, me and this cat, we rocked, and I'm all open for the convo and communication, but I just didn't expect for us to be rocking at this time of the day. And the nature of his voice, I really went from, you got my attention, to now I'm concerned. And he said, man, I just wanted to let you know that Nas passed. I won't get into detail to how that conversation went, because it was beautiful and it was personal. And I don't mean to get emotional, but that's the only reason why I had notes and script here, to keep me from being an emotional tear. Nas didn't have any preconditions going on. He was a good man in good health. Nas had a good physique about himself. He took care of himself. And whatever condition he had, he was checked himself or was admitted into the hospital and alleged had something going on, and he did not discharge from the hospital. He transitioned from the hospital. And here's how I like to remember Nas. You know how people do, you know how we do in our community. Was he sick? Was there something going on? Nah, Nas was ill. He was an ill MC. He was an ill father. He was an ill friend of mine. He was an ill engineer. And he was going to be my ill partner for the pod. And we were going to have the illest podcast. From the moment we started to co-create and ideate on a path to our pod, I've actually wrestled. I actually put this thing to bed. I actually said, maybe it's not meant to be. And I kept telling myself, this too shall pass, because I kept thinking about it. Have you ever had sleepless nights where you wake up and you start to transfer your thoughts onto some form of recording? That was me. And there was also a wave in which where we are today. We're in a wave of bad TV. Last time I checked, writers are going on strike. TV is being overwhelmed right now by non-scripted shows. Streaming is taking our airways by storm. People are more engaged with audible entertainment, podcast as a source or a resource for entertainment. And I said, I got to get back into the momentum of what we had. I said, I can't do it without Nas. I started to point and look at people and say, this person will be good and this person will be good. And, oh, I can see myself with this person. And I just kept hearing Nas say, Tay, get in your Kanye and go. You got this. And in my mind, I'm like, I don't have this. Even to this day, we got this. The spirit of Nas is always with me because this is something that I really and truly desired his presence to be by my side with. Who's going to Thelma and Louise this thing? I'm telling you. Shout out to his family back in VA. Met some of them folks. Awesome. Amazing. And to his wife, I'll keep her name private out of respect for the family. They were high school sweethearts. Nas was a dope young man. But let me tell you what I'm going to do, Nasir. I am going to follow through from our ideations. I am going to finish the assignment that was laid out. I often hear his voice, and not to be morbid or spook people out or anything like that. Oh, the voice woke you up. Listen, there is an echoing of assignment and instructions. Like my goal every day, and I say this to myself, is to make my ancestors proud. Those that thought about me before I was even a thought. I live my life to make sure I don't embarrass them. that I make them proud. So for my boy that's supposed to be here by my side, I can't let this flame go out. heDONizm. My approach is to speak to the forms of derivatives of hip-hop. Remember Rappin' Duke, daha daha. You never thought the hip-hop would take it this far. 1972. The elements, the artifacts, changing my life. And I'm going to use my voice to speak to how the derivative of hip-hop has put me in the space of where it is today. Who am I? I'm a derivative of hip-hop. I've seen the culture from its birth of its existence until today. And let me just say to you, hip-hop and Nas and hip-hop, I love you and thank you. heDONizm. The approach won't always be on this way, but I wouldn't dare press record without paying homage to my man, Nasir Nas Lee. Hey, VA, we love you. DMV, we stomp with you. To the family, y'all in my heart always. To them boys out there, y'all do your father proud. He wasn't a good man. He was great. And before he left us, before he transitioned, he wasn't sick. He was ill. And y'all know, he was an ill father, an ill MC. He was an ill friend. He was an ill man. He was one of the illest. Again, not the typical format of heDONizm, but I so thank you guys for joining. Even for those that clicked off or turned it off early, I had to get it off because I had to follow through with the vision. I'll be back. Thank you for joining me. This is heDONizm. And again, the only thing that I require for you to come in my place, which this is safe, is for you to wear your best attire. And you know what that is? It's not materialistic. It's your truth. And why is that? Because your truth looks good on you. Until we talk again, until we meet again. Get at me, y'all. Peace. And before I get out of here, let me just paraphrase and drop something that Nas was working on. Nas was big on the dream. This is his gear. This is his brand. And the phrase that went with it was, don't die with dreams inside. So long live the dreams.